30 years back, I never would have believed that a single afternoon could shatter and free an entire lifetime. Before I dive in, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city name in the comments. I love knowing the places these stories reach. Now let me take you to the moment everything changed. The crystal chandeliers sparkled above us as soft music floated through the upscale restaurant where my family and friends had gathered to celebrate my daughter's college graduation. My husband of 28 years, Martin, stood with his champagne glass raised, ready, or so I thought, to honor our daughter's achievements. But instead of a toast, his voice sliced through the gentle hum of conversation like a blade. "I've decided to start a new life without you." The clinking of silverware stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. 50 pairs of eyes darted between Martin and me, waiting for the explosion they were sure would follow. Tears, shouting, a dramatic exit. Instead, I smiled. "Congratulations on your honesty," I said evenly, my tone polite enough to confuse every witness in the room. My name is Evelyn Mercer. I'm 64 years old, and until that moment, I had played the role of the devoted wife and mother to perfection. I put my own career aspirations on hold to support Martin through 3 failed startups, 2 career changes, and countless finding himself phases. Beside me, my brilliant daughter Claire, graduation cap still perched on her head, sat frozen in horror. Across the room, I caught sight of Vanessa Grant, Martin's much younger business associate, shifting uncomfortably at the back table. She was surrounded by people I'd once called friends, the same friends who apparently knew about the affair but never thought to tell me. The same Vanessa who had attended our Christmas parties and once called me for career advice. With the calm of someone who'd rehearsed every move, I reached into my handbag and placed a sealed, cream-coloured envelope beside Martin's plate. "What's this?" he asked, his triumphant grin faltering. "Something for you to read later," I replied, keeping my voice steady. I turned to Claire and kissed her cheek. "I am so proud of you, sweetheart. This day is still about your accomplishment." Then I stood, smoothed my dress, and addressed the stunned guests. "Please enjoy your meal. I wish you all a lovely afternoon." Gasps followed me as I walked out of the restaurant, head held high, the heavy door swinging shut behind me. Outside, the summer heat of Riverton hit like a wall, but I welcomed it. For the first time in years, I could breathe freely. Behind me, the door banged open. Martin's voice, no longer confident, but high-pitched and frantic, cut through the air. "Evelyn, what the hell is this? What have you done?" I kept walking, allowing myself a small smile. The envelope contained the opening move of a plan I had been perfecting for months, a plan designed not only to protect my future, but to dismantle the fantasy life Martin thought he'd orchestrated. To everyone else, Martin was a charming risk-taker. To me, he was a man addicted to reinvention, always chasing the next big idea, while I quietly shouldered the responsibility of keeping our family afloat. I was the one who saved for Claire's education when Martin invested recklessly in a friend's doomed restaurant venture. I was the one who worked late nights as a senior finance manager at Holden Pierce Corp. when his midlife crisis led him to quit a steady job to pursue a passion for handcrafted furniture, a passion that burned out in 6 months. My own dreams? Opening a financial consultancy for women, but every time I inched toward it, Martin found a way to delay me. After Claire graduates, I told myself. After Martin stabilizes. Then, 3 months ago, I noticed small transfers from our joint account to one I didn't recognize. Having managed our finances for over 2 decades, the discrepancies lit up like red warning signals. I could have confronted him immediately, but something told me to wait. What I uncovered was worse than I imagined. Martin had been siphoning money for over a year, funding extravagant dinners and buying jewellery for Vanessa while claiming we needed to tighten our belts for retirement. His texts, discovered when he left his phone unlocked, painted the rest of the picture. After Claire's graduation, I'll finally be free. Our new life starts tomorrow. He even discussed beachfront property in another state. But Martin had forgotten one thing. I wasn't just his wife. I was a financial professional with 30 years of experience. I knew how to trace assets, and I remembered the prenuptial agreement Martin had insisted on back when I had more family wealth than he did, a document containing a fidelity clause that would soon become my sharpest weapon. While Martin plotted his escape, I quietly built my case. I met with attorneys. I documented every hidden transfer. I gathered proof of the affair. I prepared divorce papers timed perfectly for maximum impact. Filed the morning of Claire's graduation, hours before Martin's planned announcement. What Martin didn't know was that I was always 3 steps ahead. I didn't return to the restaurant. Instead, I drove to our colonial home in Riverton's historic district, the same house Martin had already promised Vanessa in his texts. I entered the quiet rooms that had once been filled with shared dreams and walked straight to our bedroom. There, hidden in the back of the closet, were Martin's suitcases, neatly packed for his grand departure. Predictable, meticulous about appearances, careless about the important things, as my phone buzzed. Zed with messages, friends from the restaurant, Claire, even Martin's sister Laura. I responded only to my daughter. I'm okay. This isn't your burden to carry. Enjoy your graduation day. We'll talk tonight. I love you. Claire would be angry that I hadn't warned her, but she'd understand eventually. She had inherited my practicality along with her father's charisma, a powerful combination that helped her graduate with honours. Hours later, I heard the crunch of tyres in the driveway. The front door slammed. "Evelyn," Martin's voice echoed through the house. "Where are you?" I was in the living room, calmly reviewing legal documents. When he burst in, his face was flushed with anger, the envelope clutched in his hand. "You served me with divorce papers today of all days?" "I thought it aligned nicely with your plans," I replied coolly. "You wanted a new life. I'm simply helping you transition." "You had no right." "I had every right," I interrupted. "Just as you had every right to choose Vanessa. We all make choices, Martin." His smugness flickered. "The prenup expired years ago. Any lawyer will tell you that." I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. "Actually, it didn't. Section 12 specifically states that the fidelity clause remains in effect for the duration of the marriage. Perhaps you should have read it more carefully." Colour drained from his face. The very agreement he had once insisted upon to protect his future earnings would now cost him everything. Our home, the vacation property he coveted, and most of our retirement accounts. For the first time in nearly 3 decades, I saw real fear in his eyes. Martin stood in the doorway, the legal envelope drooping from his fingers like a wilted flower. For the first time in decades, the man who thrived on grand gestures had no speech prepared. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Evelyn," he finally whispered, his voice stripped of its usual charm. Let's talk about this." I set the divorce papers on the coffee table, my movements deliberate, almost ceremonial. "There's nothing left to discuss. The documents outline everything." He took a step forward, desperation flickering in his eyes. "You blindsided me, in front of Claire, in front of everyone. Do you have any idea what this does to my reputation?" I tilted my head. "I imagine it hurts a little less than being betrayed by your spouse and your friends for more than a year." His face hardened. "You think you can win this? The court won't care about some dusty clause in a prenup. I'll fight you, Evelyn. I'll fight for every dollar." I leaned back against the sofa, crossing my legs calmly. "Of course you will. That's who you are. But I didn't build my case overnight. Everything in that envelope was prepared long before today. The prenup is airtight. My attorney has already filed motions. By the time you read the second page, you'll see that I've secured a court order freezing all joint accounts, including the one you so cleverly opened under your cousin's name." The flicker of recognition in his eyes told me I'd hit the mark. For months I had lived a double life. By day the polite wife keeping family appearances alive, by night the quiet tactician assembling evidence. I worked with Ruth Callahan, one of the sharpest family law attorneys in Riverton, a woman with a reputation for dismantling men like Martin. Ruth had been relentless. Every suspicious bank transfer, documented. Every luxury dinner receipt, catalogued. Every text message to Vanessa, archived with timestamps. We even subpoenaed Martin's business emails, uncovering a hidden contract in which he promised Vanessa a fresh start funded by assets that technically belonged to me. Ruth's favourite phrase became my mantra: don't confront, document. While Martin believed he was the puppeteer, I quietly collected every string. Martin paced the living room now, his bravado returning in small, frantic bursts. "Fine," he said, running a hand through his hair. "You want the house, take it. I'll walk away if you drop the fidelity claim. Let's not drag this through the mud." I met his gaze, unflinching. "The house is non-negotiable, and I'm not dropping anything." He slammed his fist against the mantel, sending a framed family photo tumbling to the floor. The glass cracked with a sharp pop. "Damn it, Evelyn, you can't humiliate me like this." "You humiliated yourself," I replied softly. The quiet in the room was louder than any shout. My phone buzzed. Claire's name lit the screen. "Mom?" Her voice was small but steady. "I just left the restaurant. Are you safe?" "I'm fine, sweetheart," I said, careful to keep my tone warm. "Go celebrate with your friends. This is still your day." "I can't. Dad's making a scene. He's telling everyone you're trying to ruin him." I closed my eyes. Martin's greatest fear was never losing me. It was losing control of his narrative. "Let him talk," I said gently. "The truth has a way of surfacing." Claire hesitated. "Mum, I saw Vanessa leave with him earlier this week. I didn't want to believe it." "I know, honey. You don't have to carry this. I've got it handled." When we hung up, a quiet strength surged through me. My daughter's future was safe. My own was finally in motion. The next morning, the ripple effect began. Calls poured in from people who had sat silently through the graduation luncheon. "Evelyn, we had no idea. We thought Martin was just being friendly with Vanessa. Please don't think badly of us." I listened, thanked them politely, and ended each call quickly. These were the same people who'd toasted our anniversaries while watching Martin slip away with a woman half his age. Their sudden concern rang hollow. Ruth had warned me this would happen. They'll rush to whichever side looks safest. Don't waste energy on their approval. She was right. My energy was better spent finalizing the restraining order that would prevent Martin from accessing our joint investment accounts until the court hearing. Within days, Martin's carefully curated image began to crumble. His business partners at Grantwood Design, a boutique firm he co-owned, learned of the fidelity clause and the financial freeze. They were furious that he had risked company assets to fund his affair. Meetings were cancelled, contracts delayed. One partner, a man named Henry Lau, called me directly. "Evelyn, I'm so sorry. I had no idea Martin was using company funds for personal expenses. We'll cooperate with any investigation." I thanked him but remained cautious. Martin's allies had a way of switching sides when it benefited them. Meanwhile, Vanessa all but disappeared. Mutual acquaintances reported she'd left town, terrified of being subpoenaed. The glamorous future Martin promised her was dissolving faster than the champagne bubbles at that ill-fated luncheon. A week later, Martin arrived unannounced. He looked dishevelled, his designer jacket wrinkled, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. In his hand was the envelope I'd given him, the first of several. "I can't sleep," he admitted, dropping onto the sofa. "Evelyn, please, let's talk settlement. I'll sign the house over. I'll even give you my shares in Grantwood. Just leave the infidelity clause out of the filing." His voice cracked on the last words. I set a second envelope on the table. Inside were bank statements from an offshore account I had traced back to him. Transfers to Vanessa. Payments for weekend getaways he'd claimed were business retreats. "This one goes to court next week," I said evenly. "Unless you agree to the terms Ruth outlined." Martin stared at the papers, shoulders sagging. The man who once commanded boardrooms now looked like a child caught cheating on a school exam. "You were always smarter than me," he muttered. "I just never thought you'd use it against me." "I didn't use it against you," I corrected. I used it to protect myself. There's a difference. Despite the chaos swirling around Martin, my days took on a surprising calm. Morning coffee tasted richer, sleep came easier. Even mundane tasks, watering the garden, folding laundry, felt different, lighter. Neighbours noticed the change. "You look radiant," Mrs. Keller from next door remarked one morning. "Divorce glow," I replied with a wry smile. But the real glow came from knowing I had reclaimed my agency. I was no longer the quiet accountant hiding behind Martin's larger-than-life persona. I was Evelyn Mercer, strategist, mother, survivor. 2 nights before the preliminary hearing, Martin made one last attempt to regain control. He sent a carefully worded email suggesting we meet privately to discuss a dignified resolution. Ruth read it and chuckled. "He's fishing for leverage. Don't respond. Let him sweat." And sweat he did. At the hearing, Ruth presented a meticulously organized portfolio of evidence: bank records, email transcripts, witness statements from waiters who'd seen Martin with Vanessa. The judge skimmed the documents, his expression unreadable. Martin's attorney tried to argue that the prenup was outdated. Ruth calmly pointed to the clause reaffirmed in a later amendment signed by Martin himself during a refinancing 5 years earlier. When the judge set a follow-up date for final property division, Martin's shoulders slumped as if the weight of decades had finally caught him. Outside the courthouse, Ruth squeezed my hand. "Phase 1 is complete," she said. "Now we move to distribution. He'll settle before the next hearing. He can't afford not to." As we drove away, my phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. "You think you've won. This isn't over." I stared at the words, my pulse quickening. Martin, Vanessa, someone else entirely. Ruth glanced over. "Don't delete it. Forward it to me. Whoever sent that just gave us another piece of leverage." I nodded, a chill running through me. The game wasn't finished, but neither was I. The message on my phone glared back at me. "You think you've won. This isn't over." My pulse quickened, but I forced my face into the same calm mask I had worn for months. Beside me, Ruth sat composed, her eyes scanning the courthouse parking lot. "Martin?" she asked. "Could be," I said, slipping the phone back into my purse. "Or someone working for him. Either way, it's good for us," Ruth replied. "A threatening message during an active divorce proceeding. Judges love that kind of evidence." Still, the words burned, not because I feared Martin, but because I knew he wasn't clever enough to send something so ominous. Someone else was moving pieces on this board. That evening, as I brewed tea in the quiet of my Riverton home, a thought surfaced that I had pushed aside for weeks. Vanessa, Martin's so-called business associate. While Martin's arrogance blinded him, Vanessa always struck me as calculating. She'd entered our social circle under the guise of networking, asking subtle questions about my work, our finances, even our daughter's plans. I had dismissed it as flattery at the time. Now I wondered if she had been gathering information. I scrolled through the message again. The grammar, the precise punctuation, it felt deliberate, not Martin's style. Vanessa, on the other hand, had once bragged about winning a state spelling bee. I forwarded the message to Ruth, who immediately filed a motion to include it in our evidence. "Whether it's Martin or the girlfriend, it strengthens your case," she said. "But be careful, people like this can get desperate." Later that night, Claire arrived unannounced. My brilliant, resilient daughter stood in the doorway clutching a small overnight bag, her face pale but determined. "Mom, I can't stay with Dad," she said before I could greet her. "He's unraveling. He won't stop calling me, begging me to convince you to be reasonable." I pulled her into a hug, the scent of her graduation flowers still faint on her jacket. "You don't have to mediate," I whispered. "This isn't your fight." Claire pulled back, eyes glistening. "I know, but he's saying things that scare me. He keeps talking about how he won't lose everything and that people will regret crossing him." My stomach tightened. Martin was reckless when cornered, But now, with Vanessa potentially in the mix, the stakes felt different, more dangerous. The next morning, Ruth and I met in her downtown office, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Riverton River. She spread out a fresh stack of documents. "Martin's assets are frozen," she explained, "but he's trying to move funds through Grantwood Design. We intercepted a transfer to a shell company registered under an alias. The judge will see this as contempt of court." "Will it delay the settlement?" I asked. "Only if we let it. I've already filed a motion for immediate sanctions. If the judge approves, Martin could lose not only his claim to your marital assets, but also his stake in Grantwood." For the first time in months, I allowed myself a small laugh. "He must be furious." "Oh, he's livid," Ruth said, smiling. "His lawyer called this morning to beg for mediation. That means he's scared." I sipped my coffee, savouring the quiet triumph. The woman Martin once dismissed as predictable had turned into the opponent he couldn't outplay. 3 nights later, a sharp knock jolted me awake. The clock read 12:47 a.m. My heart thudded as I slipped on a robe and peered through the peephole. A uniformed police officer stood on the porch. "Mrs. Mercer?" he asked when I opened the door. "We received a report of suspicious activity around your property. A neighbour saw someone near the side gate about 20 minutes ago." My breath caught. "Did you catch them?" "Not yet. We recommend installing additional security cameras. We'll increase patrols in this area for the next few weeks." After the officer left, I checked the side gate. A faint scrape marked the lock, a sign someone had tried to force it. I tightened my robe, shivering despite the warm night air. Vanessa, Martin, or someone neither of us expected? I called Ruth the next morning. She insisted we file for a restraining order and requested police surveillance during upcoming hearings. "Whoever is behind this wants to rattle you," she said. "Don't give them the satisfaction." A few days later, as I left a meeting with Ruth, I received a call from Henry Lau, Martin's former business partner. His voice was low, urgent. "Evelyn, I think you should know, Vanessa's been contacting Grantwood clients. She's telling them Martin is a victim of a smear campaign. She even hinted at inside information about your finances." "Inside information?" And I asked sharply. "She claims she has documents Martin gave her, proof of secret accounts. I don't know if she's bluffing, but if she leaks anything, it could complicate your case." I thanked Henry and hung up, my mind racing. Vanessa wasn't just after Martin's attention, she was after leverage. Ruth moved fast. She filed a motion to subpoena Vanessa, compelling her to surrender any documents she claimed to possess. "If she produces fabricated evidence, it's perjury," Ruth explained. "If she refuses, it weakens Martin's defense. Either way, we win." But Vanessa was slippery. The court summons came back unserved. She had left Riverton entirely, her last known location a rented condo 2 states away. Martin, meanwhile, grew increasingly frantic. He left voicemails alternating between rage and pleading. "Evelyn, we can fix this if you just talk to me. You don't understand what you're starting. Please, I can't lose everything." Each message only strengthened my resolve. At the next court session, Martin arrived looking gaunt and dishevelled, his expensive suit hanging loosely on his frame. His lawyer whispered furiously as Ruth presented evidence of the midnight trespassing report and the threatening message. The judge leaned forward, his expression sharp. "Mr. Mercer, can you explain why funds were moved in violation of a court order and why your estranged wife has received threatening messages from an unknown source?" Martin stammered, his confident facade crumbling. I have no knowledge of any threats. The transfers were misunderstandings." The judge's gavel struck the desk. "Until this matter is resolved, Mr. Mercer is prohibited from contacting Mrs. Mercer directly. Any further financial tampering will result in immediate contempt charges." Martin's shoulders sagged as the courtroom buzzed. After the hearing, Claire approached me outside the courthouse. Her eyes, once clouded with confusion, now burned with clarity. "Mum," she said, her voice steady. I'm moving in with you. I can't watch him spiral anymore. He needs help, and I can't give it to him." I hugged her tightly. "You're not responsible for his choices. None of us are." In that moment, the years of quiet sacrifice crystallized into a single truth. I had spent too long protecting a man who wouldn't protect anyone, not even himself. Weeks passed. With each legal victory, the weight on my shoulders lifted. I began sketching plans for the financial consultancy I had once abandoned, this time with Claire offering to help manage marketing. One morning, while watering the hydrangeas in the front yard, I spotted a moving truck across the street. Martin was finally vacating the small apartment he'd rented after the separation. He didn't look up as the movers carried out box after box, his once perfect posture now a defeated slump. For a fleeting second, I felt a pang of the love we once shared. But then I remembered the years of manipulation, the midnight scrapes at my gate, the cold texts promising a future without me. Compassion, yes. Regret, no. A month later, a certified letter arrived from the court, the final property settlement. I opened it slowly, savouring each sentence. The house was mine, the retirement accounts, mine. Martin was ordered to pay legal fees and forfeit his shares in Grantwood. At the bottom was a single line from the judge. "The court finds in favour of Mrs. Mercer on all counts." I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer Wabke's. Here I kept the first envelope, the one that started it all, a quiet bookend to a storm I had not only survived but mastered. The certified letter lay on my desk like a quiet declaration of victory. I had read it a dozen times, savouring every carefully typed line. After decades of silence, the universe had spoken clearly. I had won. But victory, I was learning, isn't a single triumphant moment. It's a series of small, steady choices, each one reclaiming a piece of yourself that someone else once tried to own. With the court's decision final, the first thing I did was open a new bank account under my own name. No joint signatures, no hidden transfers, no whispered excuses. The second thing I did was sign the lease for a small office space in Riverton's historic district. The office was nothing glamorous, just 2 rooms above a bakery that smelled faintly of cinnamon and fresh bread. But to me, it was a palace. I hung a modest sign on the door, Mercer Financial Consulting, empowering women to own their future. For 30 years I had buried this dream under Martin's ambitions. Now, as I watched the sunlight spill across the hardwood floors, I felt something deeper than satisfaction. I felt free. Claire volunteered to help with marketing while she applied for graduate school. She designed the company logo, a graceful silver compass, and smiled as she explained her choice. "You always knew where we were headed," she said, "even when Dad tried to throw us off course." I hugged her, blinking back tears. My daughter had witnessed my quiet suffering, and now she was watching my rebirth. Word of my new business spread faster than I expected. Former acquaintances, women I'd once chatted with at charity luncheons, parents from Claire's old school began reaching out. "Evelyn, can you help me review my investments? My husband keeps everything too complicated to explain. I heard what you went through. I'm so inspired. Can you recommend a lawyer? I wish I had your courage." Each call reminded me why I had endured the long months of strategy and restraint. My fight wasn't just about money. It was about showing other women that quiet strength can be the sharpest weapon of all. Of course, Martin couldn't let go without one last performance. 2 weeks after the settlement, a cream-coloured envelope arrived at my office with his handwriting on the front. My stomach tightened as I opened it, half expecting another threat. Instead, inside was a single sheet of paper bearing only 3 words. "I'm sorry, M. No excuses, no pleas, just an apology that arrived far too late." I stared at the note for a long time, searching for the anger that had once fueled me, but there was none. Martin was no longer my adversary. He was simply a man standing in the wreckage of his own choices. I slid the note into the same drawer that held the original divorce papers. Not as a keepsake, but as a reminder. Apologies don't erase harm, and closure doesn't require forgiveness. Vanessa, meanwhile, seemed to dissolve into the background of her own schemes. Through acquaintances, I learned she had resurfaced briefly in another state, working under a different name. Rumours swirled that she had tried to blackmail Martin for a share of his remaining assets, but with his accounts frozen and his reputation in shambles, there was little for her to take. I thought of the late-night message, "You think you've won, this isn't over." Whether it came from her or someone she recruited, it no longer mattered. The threat had lost its teeth. My life was no longer a game someone else could play. One crisp autumn evening, Claire and I sat on the porch of our Riverton home, the Hyde, ranges now fading into winter hues. She rested her head on my shoulder, a mug of cocoa warming her hands. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think strength meant holding a family together no matter what. Watching you, I see it's also knowing when to let go." I squeezed her hand. "Strength is making choices you can live with even when they scare you." Claire smiled. "You've given me more than a degree to celebrate, you've given me a roadmap." Her words settled over me like a gentle blessing. For years I'd worried that my quiet endurance had taught her the wrong lessons. Now I knew she'd learned the right one: never confuse sacrifice with surrender. Life after the storm wasn't glamorous. There were no dramatic finales, no confetti falling from the sky. My victories came in small, everyday moments: signing my first independent client, watching Claire receive her graduate school acceptance letter, brewing coffee in a kitchen that no longer felt like a battleground. Each moment was a thread in the tapestry of a life I had finally chosen for myself. Neighbours began to notice the change. "You look younger," Mrs. Keller remarked one morning as we exchanged waves over the fence. "Freedom is better than any skincare routine," I replied with a smile. On the 1-year anniversary of Claire's graduation, the day Martin tried to rewrite my story, I drove to Riverton Lake, a quiet spot where we had once picnicked as a family. The water shimmered in the late afternoon sun, reflecting a sky streaked with gold and violet. I sat on a weathered bench and opened the original envelope, now softened at the edges. Inside were the first divorce papers, the spark that ignited my transformation. 30 years ago I might have cried, 20 years ago I might have begged, but today I simply smiled. The lake was calm, but I felt no need for serenity. I had already built my peace. As I watched the ripples dance across the water, I thought of the women who had reached out to me, their voices trembling with the same fear I once felt. Some were married to charming manipulators. Others were quietly drowning in relationships that had eroded their confidence. If I could tell them one thing, it would be this: strength isn't about enduring the storm, it's about learning to steer your own ship, even when the waves are high. I pulled out my phone, opened the recording app, and began speaking, an unscripted message for the growing audience of my new consulting channel. My story wasn't just a legal victory, it was proof that patience, planning, and courage could turn betrayal into a blueprint for freedom. Some people believe revenge is about destruction. I used to think that too. But standing on the shore of Riverton Lake, I understood the truth. The greatest revenge is not ruining someone else's life, it's reclaiming your own. Martin lost money, reputation, and influence. Vanessa lost her illusions, but I gained something far more valuable, the unshakable knowledge that I am my own anchor. As I drove home that evening, the city lights of Riverton flickered in the distance like quiet applause. My story wasn't ending, it was just beginning.